So hi everybody, welcome. My name is Brian Proffitt. I am the Senior Manager of the Community Outreach Team within Red Hat's Open Source Program Office. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second because I am also Brian Proffitt, Vice President of Conferences and Vice President of Marketing and Publicity with the Apache Software Foundation. I am also Brian Proffitt, a governing board member for Project Chaos, a Linux Foundation project that is dedicated to measuring community health and sustainability using data analytical tools. And finally, I'm also Brian Proffitt, Secretary of the Scott organization in the Raleigh-Durham Triangle area, and it gives me a chance to wear kilts all the time, and it has absolutely nothing to do with this presentation. But I thought I'd throw that in there, you know, because we need a little, yeah, I look good in a kilt, and y'all need a little heat out there because of that air conditioning situation. But there was a point to all that. I'm not just, you know, sitting here bragging about, ooh, look at all the cool stuff I do. The point is, we all come to these conferences with different reasons, different motivations. Even single people like me can come into a conference with multiple goals. And as we look at conferences like Scale, and FOSS Backstage, and All Things Open, and even larger conferences like Open Source Summit, and KubeCon EU, which is about to happen, and you know everybody's going to go off to Paris in a minute. These are all events that have a very significant community element to them. And with community events, it's a little bit tricky. To kind of get a real sense of value out of attending the event. This goes for individuals. This also goes for projects like Ubuntu is here and Chaos is here. And also for corporations like Meta and Red Hat and you know all the other big corporations that are out on the show floor right now or have sponsored. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges of measuring value from community events, and how we can meet some of those challenges, maybe through some creative thinking and lateral sideways approaches to it. And then how do you maximize the benefits that you do find out of a community event? We'll probably use Scale quite a bit as an example since a lot of us are familiar with Scale, and obviously we're here, so it'll be a good common ground to discuss. What I'm talking about, though, should apply to a lot of other community events like Texas Linux Fest and and FOSS Backstage and Berlin buzzwords. I will tell you one disclaimer. None of what I'm going to talk about today at this point can apply to FOSDEM in Brussels. For those of you who are familiar with that show, it is a community event, but it is so wildly different from anything else that we've ever done in the ecosystem. A lot of this stuff isn't going to apply to FOSDEM, and that's actually a plus point for them because their uniqueness makes them invaluable to the community at large. So what are we talking about when we talk about, excuse me, the challenges of measuring community events? There's a lot going on in here. So the low-hanging fruit is the fact that community events really don't have a good, straightforward way of direct measurement. So when I say community events, I'm contrasting that to what we refer to in the industry as like an industry commercial event or a lead gen event. So some of the booths, including Red Hat, might be scanning your badges, okay, with those lead generation devices. Red Hat is doing that here purely for head count. We just want to know how many people came by the booth and talked to us and grabbed our swag. Okay, this is going to change, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Some companies are getting that as a way to possibly reach out to you later and send you information about their products and services. And some people are going to be saying, hey, this is how you can be part of our community. So, but lead gen also for companies is very attractive because when I go to an event like KubeCon EU or even Open Source Summit, I'm also looking for a sale. Not me personally, I'm in the community side. But people from Red Hat, salespeople, marketing people, they might be looking for direct revenue here. Okay? You come to an event like Scale, that's probably not going to happen. Because, and again, no fault to Scale at all, this is how the event is structured. This is a community event. I've been coming to Scale for over 10 years now, and I can tell you in the time I've been with Red Hat, I think we've gotten 2 actual sales from coming to this event, and that was purely by chance. That somebody with money and decision-making power wandered into the show floor and talked to the right people at our booth, and serendipity, boom. We don't come to this event looking to sell our service and support products, okay? So when you come here, and again, or events like this, a lot of people aren't here to buy anything. They're here to learn about technology. They're here to learn about open source projects. They're here to talk to people about the problems that they're having. There are a whole bunch of reasons why people are coming here. Business is usually less prioritized, again, because we're not looking for direct revenue, nor should we. And because of all that, return on investment, or ROI, is difficult to measure. And in the old days, pre-COVID, this was not such a big problem. Because, and this is still mostly true for Red Hat, but companies would come to an event like this because we want to come here. I was having a conversation with Phil last night about our perception, and he was talking about, the perception of a company like Red Hat being here. We want to be seen. We want to be a part of the community. This isn't marketing frou-frou. This is legitimate. We want to be part of the community. This is how we build our business. And so we're going to come here anyway, but a lot of other companies aren't necessarily in that same boat. Post-COVID, there are real restrictions that we are continuing to deal with for industries. And certainly, by the way, when I say organizations, I'm mostly talking about commercial businesses, but I'm also talking about free and open source software projects too. Because they want to be here too. They want to have base time, but they have even more financial restrictions, typically, to come to an event like this. So how do they get something out of a community event? So those other problems that I mentioned, the post-COVID problems, travel costs have increased. We've seen this pretty uniformly after COVID and everybody's waking back up. And a lot of people are very eager to get out to events and start getting FaceTime with their people instead of doing it over Zoom, which, we all had Zoom fatigue a few years ago. But travel costs have increased. Travel budgets, not so much. Remote work, and again, I love remote work. I'm a big proponent of remote work, but one of the potential unforeseen circumstances of that is that I was talking to some salespeople on the floor today who are here, and they are having problems because normally they get FaceTime with their customers when they go to their customers' offices. Their customers aren't in their offices so much anymore. So they are very, very concerned about how are they going to meet with potential customers or have support meetings or even user group meetings, whatever. How do they get that FaceTime when their customers aren't even in their offices anymore? And so they have 2 choices. They either come to events like this and try to get value out of that experience, or they adapt and continue to use Zoom and Google Meet and other remote virtual meeting technologies, which isn't their favorite thing. Another obstacle, which is widely well known right now, outside of the people like me who plan and run events, like that's part of what I do for Apache, is that sponsorship budgets from corporations are either flat or decreasing. And I've talked to a number of people at different events. It's not just Apache. It's, the Linux Foundation. It's, the people who run Voss Backstage. I was there a couple weeks ago. Everybody uniformly is seeing a decrease in putting out money from organizations to sponsor events like this. Now, some of that is corporations, their budgets are decreasing because, again, their travel budgets have kind of either been flat or going down, or they're finding new events to sponsor and they're not doing things like community events like this. This is, again, scale is a very general, broad range of different technologies, If a company is going to be pivoting, say, to, AI, which is an obvious thing that's happening right now, they might be more interested in taking their existing sponsorship budget and putting it in new events like AI Dev and ODSC, East and West, and so forth and so on. And if they have a flat budget, they got to take that money from somewhere else. So they're either going to decrease their sponsorship to an event or cut that sponsorship altogether. So community events are they're not in trouble, but this isn't a perfect situation. And if time keeps going in this direction, if the trend continues, community events are, I hesitate to say endangered, but we're going to have to figure out a plan as attendees, whether we're individual attendees or we're project attendees or we're corporate attendees. We need to figure out a plan on how to demonstrate value and begin to kickstart this whole thing back up. The good news is, like for here, I've talked to some of the show organizers, and I've seen this with my own eyes. It looks like attendance for this year's event here at Scale is getting back towards pre-COVID levels. It's certainly higher than what it was last year. I can see that with my own two eyes, So that's great. More attendees mean more, more attractiveness to potential sponsors to get their logo and get their people in front of all those new attendees. So that's good. So there are positive signs in here. But how do we be deliberate about what we're going to be doing and getting value? So let's talk a little bit more about why we come to these events. And by we, let's talk about corporations. Not all of the organizations here have the same goals. My goal at Red Hat is different from Perforce's across the row from me, and AWS with their tent down the way, and Flux, and then the Chaos Project, and then Canonical, the project levels too. We all have different goals. Some of us want to be here. Some of us want to be here to do sales. That wouldn't be my, preference. But some people come here hoping that they can get some good sales leads out of a show like this. Some people, most of us, want to do some form of community building. Either one of our projects or all of our projects, we want to be actively building that community, whatever it is, or just being a part of the broader community just by showing up. Networking. How many people here are familiar with the term hallway track? How many people come to Scale and other events like it just for the hallway track? Yeah. Thank you for taking time and coming to see this. Okay. I feel very honored. But yeah, let's face it, you're going to get some good talks here and there. But there's a lot of value in networking and doing hallway tracks. Last night I went to dinner with a bunch of people that I didn't really know, and I learned a whole bunch about how NVIDIA hardware chips work. And, that was way over my head. But I learned some things. I hope it sticks, But that's value. Pre-COVID, another thing where people were coming in here and looking for potential employees. Recruiters would come. Red Hat used to send recruiters all the time. Now, not so much. I can't speak for the other companies, but in Red Hat's case, we do have job openings, but not enough to justify the spend to send out a team of recruiters or even one recruiter to our booth. Because we'll just say, hey, we have jobs, just go to our website, and good luck to you, So, no, I'm not even really being facetious. It's just the numbers aren't there to justify, we don't have that many jobs open. And a lot of other companies are in the same boat. And then finally, brand awareness and thought leadership. A couple years ago, Red Hat's big marketing thing was hybrid cloud. I don't even know what that means. I kind of know what it means. But that was a big thing, and even people like me in the open source program office is like, okay, how do we work hybrid cloud into this conversation? And it's like, well, let's send them over to OpenShift. They know what's going on, things like that, But companies want to be known as thought leaders in whatever part of the technology spectrum they're in, whether it be AI or virtualization or cloud or whatever, So those are all reasons, some of the reasons why commercial entities want to come. Now, why do projects want to come? Now we're talking about free and open source software projects at this point. A lot of these are very similar. We don't have sales, but we do have fundraising. Some people come here and do active fundraising. They're either pitching potential sponsors to selling swag in their booth. Whatever they can do to get some revenue or income rather into their project. Community building, definitely. Probably way more than even the commercial companies. For some people, like UbuCon was here on Thursday, So Ubuntu is having a community event right before Scale, and they are all about community building. And I heard it went really well. Networking, same thing. They're going to want to get in front of people and talk to other people and other projects because we don't all work in a vacuum. Fedora and OpenSUSE, just to name two, that's Red Hat and SUSE. We are competitors, but our software projects work well with each other all the time. This is our opportunity to get FaceTime with them and talk to the developers one-on-one if they're here. Looking for more participants in the community. That's going to be either users or contributors. And then again, brand awareness and thought leadership. It even applies to free software projects. We want to be known as the people who know what we're doing and whatever the technology is. And again, I can go back and forth between these, and the parallels are, pretty straightforward. These are not all the reasons, but these are the big ones that I, could think of off the top of my head, and I think they're fairly universal. There might be some edge cases, but, it goes pretty well across everything. Okay, so we've talked about why people want to come here. How do we get value out of that? And there are some hints in the things that I outlined, because I knew where this story was going, so I could kind of foreshadow. So, we want to meet the challenges, but we can't do it head on. There's not going to be a direct measurement. That's the whole point of this talk. So how do we do that? Well, the too long don't read version, and don't walk out if you hear this, is you make goals that work for you and measure those. So how do we do that? Well, one way we're doing that at Red Hat is that we're creating collateral. And by collateral, that's the fancy industry name for written material. So if you go to our booth and take a picture of that QR code that's cycling in the slides on our monitor, one is a how to participate in open source projects. That's something I actually wrote. It's just a basic guideline of like, if you're new to open source and you want to be a contributor to an open source project, here are some nice rules of the road that you might want to try when you roll into a new project. You know, instead of just dumping out, 500, merge and pull requests and hoping somebody will accept them. Maybe not so much, And are we getting any lead gen off of that? Are we getting any sales off of that or anything like that? No. Right now, all we're doing is an experiment because this is all about data science. We're saying, how many people are downloading this thing? That's all. I don't care who's downloading it. I just want to know if anybody's interested in this topic. This is our kind of our test balloon. There are other pieces of collateral on another slide, and it's got like 3 QR codes, and you can stop by and scan them that have, they're a bit more focused on other parts of open source community best practices. We've got those out too. And now we're trying to see, okay, which of the 4 of those are more interesting to people? And if we find that one of them is really interesting, like people are looking at it by far the most, now we've got a potential lead on what can we come and talk about. If a whole bunch of people are interested in open source community governance, which to me is the most boring thing in the world, but okay, let's say they are interested in that. Now we can come and start talking about how do you govern your community project. Let's get some people in there. And that's just an example. I don't really think people are going to do that, but that's one way of doing it. So you do white papers like what we're doing. You do landing pages. You get people to come. This is a little more interactive. You get people to come into whatever project you need help with. If you've got a project that needs more users or more contributors, make a QR code, get people in there, and have a decent landing page that says, welcome. This isn't so prevalent anymore, but even as late as like 5 years ago, there are projects out there where you go to their homepage and you don't know the 3 basic things of that project, which is what is the project, like what does it do, how do I get it, and that's like a download link, and then how do I run it. Those are the 3 pillars of onboarding. There are a lot of sites out there that don't follow that rule for their projects. Their download link is buried like 3 levels down in a menu. Oh, here's how I get the software. That should be on page 1, up front. There should be a quick start guide from the front page, up front. People need to know how to use this stuff. This is an opportunity for you to do that. And as traffic comes in, well, that's just measuring web analytics. Again, I'm not looking for personal information. I am personally very, very, very squeamish about getting PII. Okay, and that's not just because of the GDPR and the California rules and all the other municipalities that have good privacy laws. I don't want it. I don't need it. I just want to know what people are interested in so I can talk more to them about that. Yeah, again, I actually kind of skipped ahead. Those are the 3 pillars. And you can do that on 1 page or multiple pages, whatever you're trying to do, and get them in. I'll wait for that picture. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I'm old. These have been around since what, 2013? I remember when I had to take notes at one of these things and try to do this. And now it's like, I remember like in 2016 or something, I don't know where I was, but somebody just was like doing this and I was like, oh, that's amazing. Listen, you can take the boy out of Indiana, but you can't take the Indiana out of the boy. I'm just saying. The technology, it still fascinates me, but whatever. I know. I know. It's like, why do I even come here? No, kidding. Oh, wait, that's the point of my talk. I'm so sorry. I may have counteracted the whole thing. Good night, everybody. All right, so Another way you can do this is create opportunities for participation. Yeah, I just kind of talked about that a little bit with those landing pages, but you can be even more engaged with that. Create good onboarding paths. I'm always going to hype up onboarding as much as possible. If your project has a specific goal in mind, like you could say, I would like to get 5% more contributors into my project in 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 4 quarters, whatever. Okay? And now you build your messaging for your project around that goal. How do I get people interested in doing this? How do I make sure people even know what this project is? What's in it for them? You know, is it, you know, in Rust or something like that? And now you can learn about, you get a whole bunch of Rust people or people who are interested in it. You know, I'm not a coder by trade, so some of this is a little hand-wavy, but you can build goals around things like that and get people in. If your goal is, I need to have more users, sure, build that in too. You can also start having discussions. Everybody, you know, at Red Hat, we don't say open source developers. We say open source contributors, because you don't have to code to be a part of an open source or free software project. I don't code, you know, but I can be a part of a project because I can create documentation, I can create websites, I can create white papers, I can build marketing materials. That's where my strength is. And you can attract people like that. You know, we got a guy on my team who's a designer. He's a graphic designer. He builds our logos. He built the big splash wall in our booth. He did that. That's his job. He does this for our projects and other projects all around the ecosystem. So artists are welcome, writers are welcome, people are welcome. People who do events, that's part of the community too. Okay, so you can bring people in and talk about what's needed at a high level. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the code. It can be about the project itself. It can do, best practices. You can have people get together and talk about how can I do an event in my town? These are ways you can build these opportunities for participation and measure them. It's kind of cheating when you think about it, but that's fine. If there's nothing to measure, make something to measure and go that way. Now the trick with this is, and we have to maximize the benefit, this is not a one-time deal. Okay, you're going to have to collect as much data as you can. So if you've got websites, well, these are all the website analytics. Look at your unique visitors. Look at where your visitors are going. Look at their level of engagement. Look at where they're coming from. You might be surprised. You've got a whole bunch of people who are using your project in Slovenia, to name a country. Well, okay, that's new information for me. Maybe we should start thinking about building a Slovenian user group or developer group or whatever. Whatever happens there. Focus on where they're coming from. Also, look at things like sentiment and language analysis. This doesn't have to be too rigorous, depending on your skill set, but you can look for things like, I hate this, or this, I really don't like this, or things like this. One of the things that I always tell every open source project, stop looking just for the good compliments. Look for the complaints. The complaints are there because people are taking the time, usually, to address something that's really bothering them. Sometimes, you're going to get a troll or two. Sorry, people are people. But sometimes you're going to get some valuable insights in the complaints more than the compliments. So look at all of that. Take all that data and use it to set new goals. This is a feedback loop. This is data science. You're running a hypothesis, you throw something out, you see what happens, and you get the feedback. So you can use this feedback to refine your events planning, which is what we're doing at Red Hat. Every time we do one of these new experiments in messaging or whatnot, we're going to take that, see how it did, and we're either going to tweak it or try it somewhere else and see, because not, I put all of these community events in a bucket, but to be honest, they're not all the same. Not really. Scale is different from Ohio Linux Fest, which is different from All Things Open. Their general concept is the same, but their execution is different. And again, you can take that. You can build different collateral and documentation. You can find areas in your community that are not very strong. You're having problems. Maybe you've got a high bus factor, low bus factor. And if you're not familiar with the term, that's when you've got like one or two people in your community that if they were hit by a bus, or more benignly, they win the lottery and they go off to Tahiti and they say, "See ya, suckers." What happens to your project? If you got one or two people who did that and your project's dead, you got a problem. So now you got to talk about disseminating knowledge and authority so that if one or two people leave, your project's not completely trashed. You can use this feedback to set up technical roadmaps. You can generate more informed commercial leads even, if that's where you really want to go. And that leads to the next one. Oops. Yeah. Can any of this translate to direct revenue? Here's where it gets fuzzy. It can, but you have to be very, very careful. So like my example earlier about, grow your community by 5% more developers. That's a great goal, okay? But you have to be careful there, because you don't want to make that turn into something along the lines of this. Somebody in your company, like in HR or whatever, says, "Oh, we have 5% more contributors from the outside working on our project. That means I don't have to hire as many people to work on this project from my company." Problem. And that happens a lot. And that's when open source education in your own company is very, very, very important. Because it doesn't work like that. We need paid, dedicated people to keep these projects going. Volunteerism is great. Scale is a beautiful example of volunteerism at its finest. And they are all, seriously, it's not just because you're in the room. I would have said this anyway. Y'all are great, and they all should be applauded every year they pull this show off. Because as an events manager for Apache, I look like this now. Okay, Phil's over here sporting the long hair. He's got like some kind of Dorian Gray thing going on, but no, it's hard work. Volunteerism can work, but having people who are paid and dedicated makes it a lot easier to focus time and energy on this. There are various, and this is where my knowledge stops, and this is a conversation thing for later, either in Q&A or back in the booth or wherever. There are marketing formulae back there out in the world that I am not totally familiar with that may be able to translate a lot of this into potential revenue markers. That's not my goal here, but this question came up the last time I did this talk in Berlin a couple weeks ago, and they were like, "Hey, you're Red Hat, you're going to do open source anyway. My company may not." So we need to kind of know if there is a chance that we can get some kind of fiscal markers here. Those are two ways, and then there's an open question after that. And this is something that we're working on and refining. Because I'll be honest with you, Red Hat didn't think about it, because we're going to come to the community event no matter what. But other organizations and projects might not be so lucky. So with that, I have time, I think, maybe for questions. Okay. I was going to say, if I explained it all perfectly, then I'm going to buy a lottery ticket right now and see ya, suckers. No.
So are there examples out there besides Red Hat and the ASF of other open source projects or companies that have done things in that sort of community building that you look at and you're like, I wish I had thought of that?
Yeah. I pick on Phil again. I mean, we were talking about this last night. The stuff that he was doing at Meta was extremely focused. He and his team had a very specific goal. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they had a great specific goal on how they wanted to improve Meta's participation in open source, the perception of Meta's participation in open source. And I will tell you, they did it, and they were great at it. Amazon has their own approach to open source community building. Not the one I would personally choose, but no, it's okay. Everybody's got a different way. It's not harmful, it's just different, you know?
Their whole motivation is very different from like Red Hat.
Exactly.
Whatever.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's great, I'm just saying they have different motivations.
exactly. Google and everything like that. What? Yes, Canonical is a great example. You know, we all have the opportunity to learn from each other, and we do. We talk to each other all the time. The thing I always like about this community at large is I had breakfast with somebody from Canonical this morning, you know, and Canonical, you know, we don't always get along with them, you know. Or I can talk to somebody from, here's a better example, Rocky Linux, because it's possible Red Hat didn't do some messaging right last year, you know? I don't know what we're talking about. But anyway, you know, there's not a lot of fun, happy conversations going on, but there can be at a one-on-one level, and we can, to your point, sir, learn from each other, and we do.
I'm pretty loud.
Oh, you are. But we got the recording.
Posterity. So, not necessarily an actual event, but I co-chair the Finos Inner Source Special Interest Group. And one of the things is we basically rebranded it, relaunched it, creating tons of documentation, but at the end of the day, that's not my job.
Okay.
And so therefore, it's really hard to be doing all of this stuff by myself with my other co-chair member. What would you give from some good advice outside of the box of traditional community building to get more people to join the work that we're doing?
Well, without actually like knowing what's the lift, the logistics of the lift, I mean, they're off the top of my head, I can think about things like a karma-based system. You know, Fedora has, this is something they've done pretty well with their whole badging system. You come to events, you do certain things, you write a blog, blah, 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 whatever, you get a badge, you know, and I have a few badges. And so a karma-based system is good, a rewards-based system along that. If you have the wherewithal, you can do like gift cards and things like that. You know, so there, yeah, I know, but yeah, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. There are things you can do to do that. Gamification, and I'm not really an expert at gamification, but that is a really good motivator, and that's a whole other talk. You know, but those are things that you could explore. And I would be happy to discuss this with you a little bit more offline too, because I'm, you know, just kind of spitting things out at this point. But yeah. But you look amazing. I told you I was heckling you back. I'm sorry. No.
So have you at Red Hat like had discussions with marketing folks, because marketing folks wanted to sort of take a look at, oh, who came to your events and
Yeah.
can I reach out to them?
Yes.
How do you have that conversation?
It's fun. So we are having that conversation. Yeah, right. I'm glad I can do that without actually doing the thing. We've had that conversation because we've had a little bit of a sea change. The pandemic did a number on everybody. And our events team used to be pretty unified. Like community events and lead gen events were all in one big bucket. Now they've been bifurcated a little bit. So we have an events team that does lead gen events like Open Source Summit and KubeCons and the big ones like that and supercomputing, you know, wherever. And then we have a team that does community events like this. And because of that focus is sort of specialized and narrowed, we're having the conversation with the events team, which is marketing. And they're like, they actually came to us. It's like, we want to be a part of this. We want to help you as much as we can. We don't understand where the value is here. I mean, they're not being rude. They're just like, we know it's important, but we don't know why it's important. We don't know what Red Hat gets out of this, and they've got to report to their people up above them and say, why is it important we go? You know, and the old reasons of because that's what we do are still valid, but they're not as all-encompassing as they used to be. So those conversations are a big part, those questions are a big part of why I did started this presentation. We are actively building an events policy. We're writing it down. We're going to talk about goals. I'm going to share this with the community when we're finished in 3 or 6 months, whenever. And we'll have another round of this. And we'll throw this out and see what we have happened. But yeah, the conversations aren't easy because they are very focused on direct results, you know, and we just don't get them from these yet.
Yeah, the concern I always have is, okay, you're going to take a look at the list, but you're going to blast them with the monthly newsletter or something that's not appropriate, and then
Right.
yeah,
You know, well, and we used to, when we go to these things, we do trip reports, but we were like, nobody's reading them. You know, we'd send them out outside of OSPO and OSAS, what we were called before, you know, and nobody was reading them. So it was like, okay, well, we all know what we get out of scale, so why should we, you know, bore ourselves, you know? So, yeah, it's a communication problem and an education problem on both sides because, so true story, yesterday we had some people from sales here because they're local to LA. We have a huge sales team in LA, and I don't mind having help at the booth, okay? You know, but we have a lot to learn from each other because we warned them, you're not going to get any leads here. Like, and we wanted to use this as a teaching opportunity for sales to understand that upstream is not their enemy. And most of them get that, but sometimes we have to reinforce that. And I want to learn from them about what do you look for? Because I am not a salesperson, but I am aware of there are techniques when you have conversations with people, you're supposed to active listening, yada, 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 whatever. That communication thing that seems to be important to everybody, you know. But in seriousness, I can learn from them how to do that with sales. I'm not going to do a sale, but if I hear the key words, maybe I can toss this person over very, very, very gently because we have to keep that upstream, downstream firewall in place. But I also, you know, I know where my bread is buttered. If I can gently nudge somebody that way, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, no harm, no foul. So, yeah.
Yeah, so at Meta when we were doing this, one of the things I did was I sat down with recruiting and sales and all the various people who were like, wanted their hand in the pie, and I made a real clear agreement. And one of the things we did was we didn't scan a single badge for 2 years. Because our goal, as Brian said, was to sort of change the perception around Meta's, at the time, Facebook's open source stuff. And so we only demoed things that were 100% open source. Every branding was the open source office, not Facebook. And we didn't scan a single badge. And we got a lot of pushback on that. And it actually was really useful because the goal, we were able to use it to illustrate the point that the goal was not to hire people. The goal was not to get people to use Facebook. The goal was to interact with the open source community and build trust. And what we saw was the booth got more and more crowded. We started getting random press that we didn't even try to get. People would write stories about, did you know Facebook does open source? And all of that came without having to force it. And so I think the upfront agreement that like, you're not gonna get the email list, sorry, is much better than walking and then trying to be like, no, please don't email them, because that is a losing battle.
Yeah, and I just dinged something. Phil reminded me, I actually forgot to put this in my slides after talking to him this night. Press is another, good press is another, way you can get a value out of it. And, PR departments know exactly how to measure that impact. There's no press here anymore. I mean, I'm sure there's a few journalists here, but gone, Stephen Von Nichols isn't here. Sean Michael Kerner isn't here. Joe Brockmeyer isn't here. I'm not here as a journalist. and I was really good. But seriously, we don't have a lot of media presence anymore. So you're not necessarily even going to get a story about your whatever thing you're doing in your company or project anymore from here. So that's something that's a challenge thing that's missing. I forgot to throw that in. Travel budgets are getting cut everywhere, and traditional media, even online media, it's just on the decline. People aren't reading news articles anymore for whatever reason. They don't trust the media, or they don't have time to read the media, or they get their information from an Instagram reel or whatever. Like how you consume information, this is a whole other talk, has changed. But because of those changes, traditional media outlets don't have the money to send their people here. And I'm pretty sure if Stephen Von Nichols were here today, he probably would be here on his own nickel. Don't quote me, and he can tell me I'm wrong. But I used to do that when I was a reporter, and that was 10 years ago. If I wanted to go to scale, I had to pay for it myself. Now, maybe he's working with better companies. That's fine, but it's a problem. It's been a problem for almost a decade or more. Thank you.